Ka huri taku aro ki te tai hawa uru ku rei tangara o ngā tini waka. I tēnei pō he pōti ia nei e herea. Nau mai rā e ngā waka ki te tumu herenga kōrero o te hui. Te tai hawa uru covers the western North Island, starting in South Waikato, heading down through Te Kuiti, Taumaru Nui, Taranaki, Manawatu Whanganui, and ending at Tawa in Wellington. It has over 35,000 registered voters, and in 2020 almost 70% of those voters turned out. Tonight it's another hotly contested electorate, and this is the Hui Te Tai Hawauru debate, Te Pōtitanga 2023. Oi, oi te pō, kua riro ngā mate o te wā e te rangatira Jason. Haere. Oi, oi te ao, ko tātou tēnā mahua iho nei ki te hāhātanga o te whenua. Ti hewa mauri ora, and welcome to this, the Hui Te Tai Hawauru debate. And tonight we have the leading candidates in this hotly contested electorate with us live in studio. So let's go straight to them now and introduce them. She is the candidate for the National Party, He uri no te ati haunui a pāpārangi, Ngāti apa ngā rauru, Ngāti tamakōpiri, me Ngāti whiti kaupeka, hara te hipango, tēnā koe, nau mai.
Tēnā.
She is the candidate for the Labour Party, He uri no Ngāti apa, Ngāti rangi, Ngāti tūwharetoa, me Waikato, ara no te waka o Tainui. Peke-Mason, nau mai, tēnā koe. And she is the candidate for the Māori Party, He uri no Ngāti Ruanui, Ngā Ruahine, me Ngā Rauru, Debbie Ngā Rewa Peka, nau mai, tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for coming off the campaign trail to Tāmaki Makaurau. We really appreciate it. Now, we went through another process, about 2 minutes to 8, actually, just about 3 minutes ago, to decide who would speak first tonight. Nō reira, Soraya Peke-Mason, kei a koe te wā.
Tēnā koutou i ngā iwi o te mutu. Our people in Te Tai Hawauru deserve an MP that will fight, have a presence and a focus on the ground in the electorate. Known for hard work, integrity, getting stuff done, experience, you will be my full-time priority #1. We have pushed more kaupapa Māori policy across the line than any other government. Funding increases to whānau order, Matatini to receive 35 million, including building capacity in the regions, establishment of Māori Health Authority and building over 13,000 public homes since being in government. I am seeking 2 ticks. One, for the party to consolidate our significant kaupapa Māori policy. I am not on the list. My passion is to be a full-time, dedicated servant to you, the people of Te Tai Hawauru.
Tēnā koe, Soraya Peke-Mason. Ko huri kia koe i aia nei, hara te hipango, kei a koe te wā.
Kia ora, ko haere te hipango au. E tuana au kei a koutou, ko au he hauhau I te tai au. Te Tai Hawauru. I stand before you, I stand with you, and I stand up for you, our people, our place with purpose. I stand with National to value you, to add value, investments in our people, our place with purpose. Ko koutou he iti kahurangi. I stand as a 2-term Member of Parliament, elected 2017, listed 2020, the only Māori woman in the National Party caucus. My return is contingent on your party vote and candidate vote hipango, to continue my stand for you, my stand alongside you for our whānau, ngā take Māori and te ao Māori. With 30 years helping many, the desperate and the disparate, in the justice, health and social sector systems, criminal, family, youth and child welfare, domestic violence and mental health. I come with experience both in the private and public sectors. I stand in this election in Te Tai Hawauru with the support and endorsement of Dame Tariana Turia. She knows me. She knows my service, she knows my head, my heart and my hands. On the ground, grassroots, at the coalface, enduring and dedicated to te ao Māori, to our people for a better Aotearoa New Zealand. Today, New Zealand and New Zealanders, especially Māori, have suffered and struggled under this taxing Labour government, promised much and delivered little. So now is the time for you to vote National, 2 ticks blue, to make the difference for a better Aotearoa.
Arete, tēnā koe. Ko huri I ai nei kia koe, Debbie Ngā Rewa Peka, tēnā koe.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou. We are the most incarcerated, homeless, unskilled and living in poverty. 250,000 of our people are earning less than $30,000 a year, and 50% of those belong to whānau in Te Tai Hauauru. Our wai, our moana, our awa are in crisis. Our seabed mining is still being at threat, and we still see the bottling of our water being exported. Our awa are unswimmable, our reefs are in trouble. I want you to close your eyes and imagine a future Aotearoa. And I want you to think about what it would be for us as a people to be thriving, not just surviving. And I want you to also think about me as your candidate for 2 ticks, who will be focused on making sure that we push for te tiriti in everything, that we strive for racism-free policy, that we challenge and we dismantle systems that are holding us back and putting us in permanent poverty. We will accelerate all our solutions. We will use our own data, our own mātauranga Māori. Nowhere else are we tangata whenua, nowhere else. We believe that tino rangatiratanga is our destination. And as the member who belongs to the only tangata whenua party, we will focus on your solutions, on our direction, and on developing that Aotearoa hau, me as your candidate and us as Te Pāti Māori. Kia ora rā.
Kia ora mai rā. Tēnā koutou katoa i a koutou kōrero. Thank you all very much indeed. Now, throughout this election campaign, as you know, our reporters have made their way to all of the Māori electorates. I puta ake a Miriana Johnson ki te rohe pōti nei ki te tai Hauauru kia whakarongo ake ki ngā kaupapa nui o te wā. Let's take this report now from Miriana.
The beautiful thing about Waitara is the community. We're all one whānau.
Do you see many politicians in New Plymouth?
Not particularly.
Kia ora, I'm Miriana Johnson, and I'm here in New Plymouth, the heart of the Te Tai Hauauru electorate, which stretches from Kāwhia to Porirua in the North Island. And I'm here to find out from Taranaki locals what are the issues that matter to them this election.
So I'm a second year nursing student here in Taranaki, and our healthcare system is completely at wit's end, and nurses are tired, nurses are leaving.
I feel that one of the urgent problems we face is the prevalence of mental health in our community. Many people struggle with depression, anxiety and stress.
What are the things that are affecting you in your life?
Mental illness. Yeah.
A lot of people smoking meth, to be honest.
Would you say that's a really big problem here?
Yes, it's a very big issue, and sometimes I feel like the cops can't even get on top of it here in New Plymouth.
The cost of living is a big thing. Like, I've got 4 kids of my own, and it's hard.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh, it's a struggle. Everyone's struggling. Yeah.
Gas has gone up, food's going up.
Can't even get a scoop of chips cheap.
Nah, you're going to have to win the lotto, sis. So. Someone won some money this week on lotto. It wasn't me. It's quite hard for whānau to find suitable housing within our community.
We have a lot of emergency housing going on. A lot of hotels are housing whānaus, people living in their cars. There are a lot more homeless people, I've noticed, in our community more than there used to be. That's just the fact that we don't have housing. People can't afford to live. People can't afford to put bread and milk on their table sometimes. Taranaki used to be a real lively place, and it still is, but as time's gone on, people are closing down their businesses because they can't afford to stay open.
So tell me, what is the big issue for you here?
For here, it would be youth crime.
I don't think there's enough for youth to do here, and that's probably reflective right throughout New Zealand when you see the youth crime stats. Is there actually enough for youth to do? When I was growing up, there was plenty to keep us occupied, and I just feel that there's maybe a lack of community that gives kids a purpose now. So their purpose is ram raids and crime. Yeah.
So there you have it. The people of the Tai Hauauru have spoken. The big issues in this electorate are healthcare, cost of living and youth services. So the question is, What are you going to do about it?
E ngauri tō pūranga ariki o te tai hawauru au kauana te pupuhi o haumihi kia koutou katoa. Thank you for your kōrero. Let's get into the issues. Let's start with cost of living. Debbie Ngārewa Peka, what's the most significant thing and the greatest impact that you can achieve for the people of te tai hawauru through the Pāti Māori?
I think first of all I want to mihi to our whānau in ngā motu. I'm aware of a lot of our iwi, Dion, Tutama, Tiatiawa, Taranaki, Tuturu. They're doing a lot of amazing mahi over there. What we have though is a systemic issue in the fact that poverty, we can call it cost of living, cost of survivance, is affecting a whole lot of matters. And our impact that we believe and will stand by, tūturutu, is our tax policy, because we believe to address the to tax the wealthy and to be able to take GST off kai, to be able to make sure that we're addressing the ghost houses, that we're able to then affect positively 98% of the population. And that's what we've been really emboldening about, is that the big parties are ruling that out. That is what would make an overnight ease of pain for our whānau and the hardship of businesses and those that need to support rangatahi doing things. So.
Haere te hipanga, I'm going to ask you the same question. The biggest significant policy which will have the greatest impact for our whānau of te tai hawauru?
So with the cost of living, of course, it's about getting kai onto the table, and it's about having the pūtea to do it. We have so many of our people who are unemployed, and under this government, regrettably, the figures have shot through the roof. We have 30% more Māori who are without work, and they're not working. So the important issue, of course, is education and employment. But the reality is that we have the immediacy of dealing with the situation. So the National Party policy that's come out is looking at tax relief for those of our whānau who are working. I'm aware that the median income for many of our whānau within te tai hauru, and we have a number who are in relative employment, but those who aren't, there are the struggles associated with that. So the National Party has looked at tax relief with those whānau who have children of at least $250, those who are working. Those who aren't, we're aware that that will decrease, but then there's the other issue associated with whānau care, and then there's whānau order, which is the portfolio I have the privilege of being spokesperson for.
Okay, lots in there, and I'm going to pick up on some of these issues as well. I do want to give time to Sora Peke-Mason to answer the question as well. The significant, biggest impact that you can have through a policy of the Labour Party.
Yeah, sure. Look, Julian, I'm proud of the work that we have done in this space to put a little bit more back in the pockets of everyone. It's just not one single thing. It's actually a number of things that we are doing to help to support and lift our people out of poverty, out of their struggles, such as the minimum wage. We've increased it by $7 since coming into government. GST, of course, of fresh fruit and vegetables, free prescriptions, with over 3 million who have prescribed since just July this year, free dental for those up to the age of 30. There's the winter payments. So it's just not one thing. It's a whole lot of things to help lift our people out of this environment.
You heard the comment in that track about bread and butter, that people can't even afford bread and butter on the table, let alone anything else. So when I hear people talk about tax, I think a lot of that conversation gets lost in our whānau. Yeah. Yet I heard you all in some way, shape or form talk about tax in some way. So Debbie Ngārewa Peka, how is the tax policy going to have an immediate effect on whānau?
Yeah, I think, and I totally agree with what you're saying, because the minute you say wealth tax, it's like, well, that doesn't matter to me. So what happens is that the average whānau here are paying 20.2%, 24% in tax. The rich are paying 10%, 9%. So when we talk about tax, what we're talking about is how much the rich are being looked after in a system that was designed for them. So if I was to try and put this into a language that our whānau can understand, what we want to do is change the tax system so that those who make the most, those who've actually done really well off our land, those who've done really well off our resources and polluting our resources, can actually pay more for that privilege, and we pay less. So when you go to work, you actually get more of your own money back in your pocket. And that's what I was sort of saying before. So for somebody's on $50,000, $60,000, they'd get an extra $4,600 a year in our tax policy. This tax policy over here is an extra $4 a week, and this tax policy over here doesn't even affect our whānau. So what it is about making sure those politicians understand how hard you're struggling, and they're going to use their influence to pull every lever to make their lives easier.
So,
that's what
we'll come to you, Sora, before I come to Harete, because there's a direct challenge here. So if you have a look at OCR, 5.5%, that was announced today. Inflation over 7%. You've also got an issue in dealing with all these factors with the cost on whānau if inflation continues to grow, and could do over the next year. that means less in the pocket, doesn't it? Particularly with the $4 accusation that was just made. What's your response to that?
Look, we've got apprenticeships and cadetships that, out there to help to train our young and to, so that they've got better jobs to go to in terms of meeting the demands, in particular in the economy around the construction industry. So, by providing those platforms and those opportunities for our young people, they're able to, stand with dignity and be able to provide for themselves. So that, that's where we're coming from in terms of support and helping them.
In all due respect, though, those apprenticeship things are helpful, but only the first year.
Yep.
The second year, there's a tier system, and you actually start losing. So
we might try and pick up on that more when we talk about rangatahi. We'll talk about later on. But let's come to you, Harate Hipango, very quickly. Your tax plan, as reviewed by international tax experts, have said that the tax plan National provides and talks about will not fully offset the inflation effect cuts will have on them. What's your response to that? Because it sounds like your tax plan doesn't stack up. Yes, that's the one you're talking about.
The issue is that we've got inflation that's at about 6%, and then we've got wage growth that's only at 4.3%. So the overall issue is looking at adjusting the economy, fixing the economy, making that better than what it has deteriorated to
specifically on the tax
this.
plan, though, which they have said will be inflationary.
So in terms of the tax plan, and I heard your debate with Christopher Luxon, the leader, and the issue for the National Party is it's about getting people off welfare and into work. But the immediacy for our whānau is that they need kai on the table now. It's all very well to talk about these training programs and all. That's a longer term picture. So the immediacy of the situation, and this is where it comes back to our community leadership. And this is where I speak with whānau order, and it's about what we're doing on the ground, and that there are kai food banks there for our people. But the longer term, in terms of the tax relief and also the family boost starter packs, is about getting pūtea into the pockets of our whānau so they can...
But your housing tax has got holes in it.
We've got more time, and we will discuss some of these issues a bit further. We're also going to deal with some of the other issues and topics that were raised, the kaupapa that were raised in our opening track. We'll have more after this. We are going to talk about mental health and well-being after the next break with our leading candidates from Te Tai Hauauru, Tarokawi Hone. O te pōtitanga 2023 tēnei, e tūhahana i ngā kōrero tōranga pū o Te Tai Hauauru. Welcome back, and we have the leading candidates for the Te Tai Hauauru electorate with us tonight. Let's now take you to a question from a voter in Te Tai Tokerau. He reo, he kōrero no te Tai Hauauru. Ki mātakitake ake rā tātou, ke whakaronga ake rā tātou ki te tai urupaunamu nui no te rohe o Te Tai Hauauru.
Kia ora, my name is Leon Crane and I'm from Waitara. One of the urgent issues we face in our community is the prevalence of mental health problems. Many people struggle with depression, anxiety and stress here in our community. To the politicians that are watching, what strategies or initiatives do you propose for access to mental health, and what can you do to help promote mental well-being for our residents? What can you do to help the situation within our community, especially for Māori?
I'll start with you and then I'll go down the line. Ka pai, tēnā koe Leon I tēnā pātai I tēnā kōrero. So let's talk about mental health and well-being now. Harete Hipango, your response to Leon in that question?
Thank you for the pātai to me first. This is an area that I've devoted a significant part of my legal career advocating for our tangata whai ora in the mental health institutions and in the courts, and also working with our rangatahi in the youth justice sector. So it is something that I do know about. What's really important is about empowering and enabling our communities. And in Wanganui, Te Oranganui was the first Māori health provider established 30 years ago with Dame Tariana Turia and George, and I worked alongside them to do that. So the answer is about at the ground level, at the grassroots, resourcing from central government, our providers there. So the immediacy of the situation, and it is a crisis, from the National Party policy is recognising the good work that Mike King has done, that regrettably this government hasn't done in supporting with the pūtea to go to those community organisations.
Okay, actually, that's not true.
That is accurate.
We've got the largest investment in mental health ever for any government. $100 million we are investing in this area to help with this issue, and that's going to be unfold over the next 4 years. More than 900 additional full-time professional and new workers to support the mental health well-being of our communities. We have over 124 new primary mental health services in Te Tai Hauauru right now. We've expanded the mental health support into the schools, through the rollout of mana ake into the small businesses as well. We've expanded it also into the rural sector because we identify that those are the issues, and they're big issues. It's critical.
I think I want to recognise the mahi of, as you said, Harate Te Oranganui and Hayden Wano and the report that they did from Te Huringa Tuarua. And in that there was a whole lot of recommendations which sadly haven't all been supported and do need to be resourced. And they are talking about age appropriation, making sure that we have services and support, making sure that we accelerate, and I said this in my opening speech, mātauranga Māori models. Te Pāti Māori's health policy actually addresses the fact that we believe that there needs to be more invested in health, and then particularly more invested in mental health, and that we need to be able to develop and resource models that are accessible to everybody, no matter where you live. Okay. And just before you close me down, Julian, I also want to do a plug for the fact that it's about having equity for our providers, not just the clinicians, but also our mahi atua, our own tohunga, our own people who help us be well. So Te Pāti Māori has a real focus on what it is that the whānau and the community need, as well as continue to strengthen our bastion policy, which obviously is whānau ora.
So how do you do that quickly?
I think
given the crisis now,
how you do it quickly is that you stop, and I heard the wakaaro that yes, Labour has given a whole lot of funding in health universally, but for Māori we only got 2%. Our policy states that we would immediately invest 25% into our own health services, into our own models. That's it. We would continue to enhance, not play around with the Māori Health Authority. That's what our people deserve, and that's what Te Reti says. Okay, so
Peke-Mason, you've heard that argument.
The mental health well-being, but more importantly, the Māori Health Authority is a perfect example of Te Tiriti walking for Māori by Māori. What we've got here is an opportunity for our people on the ground within their own communities, hapu, iwi, to be able to develop their own services, to be able to close those gaps that they have around the health issues, to be able to shape the services that they want for their communities, for their wānau.
I guess what people are saying, though, they want an acceleration of that, an increase in the budget size to be able to do that.
Look,
can you commit to do that?
Transformation takes time.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't have to take time if we truly believe in our own solutions.
This government has had 6 years.
No one
I just want to come to Harete. Harete Hipango. So again, the question that gets raised here, and this is an interesting one, because I think you're also proposing, your party's proposing, to have a Minister for Mental Health, right? If there is a Minister for Mental Health, how's that going to move the needle for Māori mental health need and well-being?
What it does, Julian, and those viewers and listeners in Te Tai Hauauru and throughout the motu, is it gives priority and recognition that this government hasn't done. 6 years in power, and there's very little. There's been a $12 billion increase in funding, and what we've seen, all the setbacks that's come from the health system. So speaking specifically about mental health, the National Party was the first party to commit and recognise the significance and the importance of mental health. Our spokesperson is Matt Ducey, and should National come into government, have the privilege to do so, he will be the Minister for Mental Health, with a priority and a focus with, as a Māori woman member in caucus who has had the experience of working in the sector, working in the units throughout the motu, of being able to advocate and stress the importance of that whakaaro Māori, mātauranga Māori, but also the operational implementation of that.
There's advocacy and there's action, and the accusation is that a minister won't be able to dedicate the resources specifically to Māori health and wellbeing. I know you said you're going to advocate, but how do you turn that into action?
So turning it into action, the issue has been brought up about the Māori Health Authority, and it's well known that the National Party takes a view that rather than centralising and setting up separate bureaucracies, the power base is in the community. And I've talked about the power base and enabling and empowering our communities. So it's not about dumping, it's actually reprioritising from the ivory towers of bureaucrats to our people on the ground who are the ones who are suffering. And it's actually those of us in our communities, and I've said that I've worked in this space for 30 years plus, Te Oranganui, we have our workers, we have our providers, and it's resourcing. And you've mentioned Te
Oranganui earlier. Look, because of the Te Aka Whaiora, I think we're going to talk more actually about Te Aka Whaiora later on in the programme, so we will talk about that. But after the break, one of the issues that came up in our package was housing. So we are going to talk about housing with our leading candidates from the electorate of Te Tai Hawauru. Kia mautunu mai e ngai, we he kōrero nui anō, te haere ake nei. Ko hoki mai nei koutou ki tā tātou hui e whakakōrero ana i ngā take nui atorohe o Te Tai Hawauru. We have with us here Debbie Ngārewa-Paka of the Māori Party, Soraya Peke-Mason of the Labour Party, and Harete Hipango of the National Party with us live in studio. Let's talk about housing. It was raised in our package earlier. Soraya Peke-Mason, the accusation is Labour hasn't done enough, fast enough in terms of housing, and there is still a great need for housing in Te Tai Hawauru. What's your response?
We inherited an absolute mess from the previous government. A crisis, in actual fact. There were 1,500 less houses than the previous governments when they started. So we're trying to sort that out. It's not going to be a fix overnight, but what we have done is built 13,000 public homes since coming into government. We work with our communities, our wānau, our apu, our iwi. We have a centred approach to this particular issue in the electorate. In 2021, we launched the Maihi Ka Ora, the National Māori Housing Strategy. This government, if Nats or ACT get in, they're going to do away with that. Over 700 apprentices and cadets have been involved in the building of these homes and maintenance, which is, which builds that capability and capacity for
Okay, Harete Hipango. So I guess the question again is the same. How many houses will be built if National becomes government in Te Tai Hawauru for the people of Te Tai?
Before answering that question, Julian, I think it's important to put things into perspective here. It's really sad that we've got so many of our Māori whānau who are living, they're homeless, they're living in a hotel, they're living in motels, or they're living in cars. So half of the 25,000 who are waitlisted for social housing are Māori, and then we've got the majority of the 7,000 to 8,000 who are in emergency housing.
So what will you do?
Are Māori. So National has given a priority in terms of emergency housing and social housing to go through and identify those who have been too long in that situation and place them into homes. We've also got a commitment that, well, Labor has said that they'd build 6,000 additional public and transitional houses. To date, very little of that has been done, despite political talk and what the politicians are going on about. So National has a plan to deliver better social housing and to end the regrettable housing crisis that's here at the moment.
And so can I get a figure?
There's a whole lot of other levers that need to be adjusted.
Can we get a figure? Into Tai Hawauru?
Into Tai Hawauru, I don't have a figure. I wouldn't make that commitment because I've just come new into this, 6 months.
Okay.
And with an absence of 20 years from the National Party, it's about going out on the ground and listening to the people.
Te Bingaru Peka. How many into Tai Hawauru?
Oh, look, I think, first of all, what we want to do is address the fact that we have whenua Māori, we have Papa Kainga. I've been to multiple hui around Te Tai Hawauru of our whānau that actually want to be able to have all the barriers removed so they can build on their papa kainga. So what we want to do is immediately see 800 million that's put aside to be able to help build on these whenua Māori. Now, you may sit there and say, Debbie, that's a heck of a lot of money, but there's $1 billion that was spent last year just on emergency housing. What we also want to address is the fact that not everyone is going to be able to afford and even wants to have their own property. So we want to address the fact that 50% of the social housing that and the income, the money that's adjusted to it, is actually committed to Te Tai Hawauru. So we would see a allocation to the building. Now, those partnerships, and this is really what the question is, how? So, we can find the money. That's not the hardest. We've seen that through COVID. The money was dropping from the clouds. But what we want to do is be able to identify the iwi, the trusts, the whānau, the hapu, the NGOs that are ready and have been shovel-ready for a very, very long time. I hate to use that terminology, but that's how we do it. So it's an end-to-end model. Make sure the 50% of the allocation towards Te Tai Hawauru, towards Māori and Aotearoa, is done in social housing, and make sure we remove the barriers so that we can build on our own whenua.
Can I get a quick show? Just quickly before you respond. Before we go further, can I just get a quick, because you've all talked about community organisations actually a lot tonight. So can we all agree that you will all, no matter who the MP is, and indeed who the government is, that there is a commitment to work particularly with iwi, who are ready to go to help solve the issue in housing and homelessness?
We have to acknowledge that those models...
We're actually doing that now.
If we just look at those models, you look at Kaururoa and you look at some of the models that are happening with the way that we've got a whole lot of iwi, a whole lot of groups working together, that's already on the ground waiting. The poise is happening from making sure, because you've got to remember, this government didn't have a Māori housing strategy until Te Pāti Māori jumped up and down. So you've got to remember we have to make sure that we pull these things out of the bureaucracy into the pipeline of our whānau who've been waiting there for a long time to make
Look, not only
Peke-Mason.
Not only have we got that, we've also got a Minister for Homelessness, that has a lens and a focus on this particular issue. It's not a quick fix, but in 2020, when we launched the New Zealand Homelessness Action Plan, that's to help and to work with our wānau, our hapu and our iwi. They're partners. As Deb said, it's happening on the ground and it will continue when we get back into government.
So the 6,000 figure that was mentioned earlier, and that is part of the policy that the Labor Party has talked about, is that number too realistic? Is it not brave enough? Not bold enough? I'll just get that from Sarai.
No, I'm not government yet. So.
Yes.
6,000, is that brave enough and bold enough? Because 6,000 doesn't sound like a lot when you have to talk about the people in Te Tai Hawauru.
So what we're doing beside that as well is actually we've got a maintenance plan in place where we're fixing houses where people can stay in their own homes, but we know that they're leaking or they have issues around power or whatever. We are helping, or dampness in particular, so we are helping to fix those homes. So there's a number of things beside each other that we are doing in terms of supporting...
The healthy homes for whānau is important here. So for those who don't want to own homes and have to go into rentals, right? The issue that people talk about with National is that it's focused on landlords, the interest deductibility, reintroducing no-cause terminations. How's that going to help the people of Te Tai Hawauru?
Well, how it will help is the fact that all the legislative changes that have been imposed under this government has seen that there's been, on average, $180 per week increase in the rent. And that's driven our people out into homelessness. So it's just adjusting that, looking at the reality, the cost of living impact. So there are all these different levers levers that need to be pulled. And to answer your question earlier, the National Party will commit to building an additional 6,000 social houses, and in addition to that, the number of social housing places to 80,000 over 4 years. So those are the figures that have come out from our housing spokesperson. But to come back to the condition of housing, it's deteriorated under this government because they've seen fit to impose all these conditions and standards onto the landlords and the owners,
so
and as a result, that's
you're giving the guarantee tonight to the interest of you're giving the commitment guarantee here tonight that the interest deductibility will not sit with the landlords and those rents will come down, because the experience shows that hasn't been the case.
Absolutely. And I'm not in the position to give any commitments on behalf of the National Party. The commitment that I do make, though, is to be an advocate and a representative for the issues of concern and for the people in Te Tai Haere.
You made that point. We have a lot more to talk about after the break. We are talking health, te aka whai ora, and upholding te tiriti commitments. Kia ita tonu maira, e ngai ui. Arano atu ngā kōrero nui e putaputa ake ana I te rohe o te tai Hawauru. So let's get back into it now. He pātai anō, he māpuna ake ana I te rohe pōtine. Let's take another question from a voter in the Te Tai Hawauru electorate, and it comes from someone at Mururopatu Marae.
Tēnā tātou katoa no Taranaki ahau, ko kai whakawhānau, kahupōkai tōku mahi, ko Tawira Trinda tōku ingoa. Kia ora, I'm Tawira. I'm from Taranaki and I'm a Māori midwife. I run a kaupapa Māori antenatal education program. So the issues we face are whānau engagement and access to kaupapa Māori services, especially within health, lack of staff. And the gap there is having Māori staff and Māori service providers. So there's a big gap in recruitment and retention. My challenge to you is how are you going to honour and maintain the tiriti o Waitangi promises in the Te Aka Whai Ora Māori Health Authority, and how are you going to maintain what the contract currently is, and how are you going to sustain that to meet the treaty obligations? Kia ora.
Tāwera tēnā rawa atu koe I tēnā pātai. Ngā mihi nui hoki ki te whānau o Mururopatu. It's great to see them marae. Let's get answers to your pātai now. We'll start with Sarai Peke-Mason.
Te Aka Whai Ora, we are doing it. We take our obligations in terms of te tiriti very, very seriously. We will fight, and we will continue to fight to include te tiriti in legislation as much as we possibly can. This has been a big push of ours, and more than any other government, we've implemented te tiriti into the free trade agreements, Māori wards, we've got the RMA, education, and of course health. And so, you know, our chiefs, they were brilliant. It wasn't their fault that there are two versions, but we stand by the Māori version. There is a lot of work to do, but we are doing it right now, and we will continue with Te Aka Whai Ora.
What about the workforce issues that Tāwera talked about? It was also mentioned in the earlier track around nursing. Yep. How do we deal with the workforce issues we currently have in the health system?
Yeah, no, very good question. And that's being addressed now, but there's more that we need to do. We've got 95 additional places each year in terms of placement, clinicians. We've got, this is recruitment and retention. retention that we're talking about here. Over the past 5 years, we've seen 22.7% increase in nurses and 22.8% doctors. We've built that whole new mental health units across the country with support, mind you, online.
Okay, te mi ngāre bua Peka, an answer to Tāwera.
Yeah, first of all, I want to mihi te Tāwera. Everyone that knows what she and everyone else that's involved in this kaupapa do is just magic. And I want to be able to commit to you, my darling, that we will do everything we can to make sure that we resource you, that we resource kaupapa, that we resource our own models of care. And what that looks like for us, for Te Pāti Māori, is that we actually don't accept the 2% that keeps coming in a crumbs manner, and that we address the fact that 25% of what's been allocated in health needs to be specifically taken away and given to Māori. We need to make sure that aku whaiora and all our other future models of support and care can happen, and not only just grow the workforce, but actually retain, because that's the other part of it. And I don't know if you know a lot of our wahine, a lot of our whānau that are in hauora and what they're doing, but they are working long hours. It's extra harder for them because there is an expectation different from within our community. So I just want to make sure that you know and you can trust that we will support you and support all our models that are replicating what we looked like before our natural development was interfered with. That is about honouring te tiriti. So ngā mihi aroha.
Tēnā koe. Obviously, hara te hipango, your party under your government, if you become government, te ako whaiora is Goldberger. So how do you respond to Tāwera?
I respond by saying that the resourcing, as I've repeatedly said throughout this kōrero, Julian, is not at central government level. It needs to be on the ground at the coalface and grassroots. So we've got our people in the community who are talking about the struggles and the hardships. And in the meantime, we've got a government that's prioritising establishing another bureaucratic institution. There's been 14,000 additional bureaucrats on top of those servants there. And it's about serving the community. That can't be done in Wellington, a centralised ivory tower model. It's got to be down on the grassroots level. So we're talking about Te Aka Whaiora, which is a separate entity. There was the Māori health unit within the one entity, and it's about utilising the best resources that there are by putting that back into the
The argument was that Māori health unit, the Māori health unit existed in the previous structure, and it didn't work, which is why Te Aka Whaiora was a direct response. And actually, Te Aka Whaiora is about decentralisation. So how do you respond to that?
It's interesting you say it's about decentralisation when $168 million has gone into setting up a bureaucratic institution in Wellington that has been acknowledged would take 5 years before there was any efficacy on the ground in the community. In the meantime, that resource, that pūtea, should be going directly to our community providers, organisations. And I've referenced again Te Oranganui, there's Tui Ora and Taranaki. Te Oranganui, 30 years has been going and doing it. It's about leadership. And the leadership is with the communities, but also the leadership within those institutions.
Okay, you've all talked tonight about community development and the need to work with people on the ground. What they will want to hear tonight, no matter who becomes the MP and no matter who becomes the government, how you are going to work, if you are the MP, to ensure that the region, that the rohe is developed and thrives and flourishes quickly in the next term. So I'm going to ask the same question to all of you. How are you going to do that? Debbie Ngārua Peka.
I think first and foremost, I'm going to do it as Te Pāti Māori promotes, which is as tangata whenua, in the only tangata whenua party, and making sure that we have the te riti honoured and we continue to accelerate our own solutions. We are not the problem waiting to be punished, we're the opportunity waiting to happen. And so how I will do it in the electorate, if I'm honoured and blessed with your support for 2 ticks, is to make sure that we represent and fight hard. And I guess that's what we have to have, is people will fight hard for you if they believe in you and they believe in our own models. That's the problem here.
Hare te hipongo.
So in terms of addressing the needs for the people of Te Taihauru, it's about the ability not only to look, listen and learn, but to apply that and influence the colleagues at the cabinet table. And so that's what I would do. That's really important because it's such a vast area, but there are such vast issues, and it's about having that ability to influence and to ensure that those ministers are on the ground and are implementing what needs to be done.
Sarai Peke-Mason.
Look, what's important to me is not my aspirations for the regions, it's actually the aspirations of our people on the ground. That's where I will be working. That's why I'm making myself available as a full-time Member of Parliament to serve the people of Te Tai Hauauru. Once I know that, once we know those aspirations, then we move forward together.
Tēnā koe. Let's get your final mihi now. I am counting. So we've got 45 seconds to try and close from each of you. Again, Sarai, you're kicking us off.
Thank you. This is the closing.
Yes.
Okay, right now?
Aye. Kei a koe te wā. 45 seconds.
In the future, I see the vision of our tribes in Te Tai Hauauru who have settled gaining positive momentum by prospering where the pani me te rawi kore, the orphans, the widows and the poor have a warm, dry roof over their head, income to survive, access to rongoa and well-being services, and wānanga that equips our mokopuna, our tamariki, our rangatahi with skills that drives their dreams and aspirations through life's journeys. I see an electorate where tribes and government work in harmony together, and that the 98% of the goodwill raised at the marae at the Kingitanga 23 is achieved and honoured by upholding the principles of participation, partnership and protection under Te Tiriti.
Kia ora maira.
Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. Te Bingarua Peka, your closing statement, 45 seconds.
Kia ora. Look, whānau, what we have before us is a tight election where either of the big parties are going to get in. The truth be known is if you want to stop a national and an ACT government, you need to vote 2 ticks for Te Pāti Māori, and let me explain why. Because Labour is going to get in on its Pākehā votes, it's its party votes that are going to get it through, not its candidate vote. So we need to stop the absolute chaos that a right-wing government would do for us. I therefore plead for you and ask you to give me 2 ticks, grab all your whānau, get them to that booth and get them to participate, because, my God, we do not want to go backwards with what is being proposed on the right. Kia ora.
Tēnā koe. Hare te hipango, your closing statement.
Kia ora. I stand here as a woman of dual heritage and the recognition of the importance of empowering and enabling our communities and bringing us together as a nation. We've been divided by so many different issues, so I stand here before you all seeking the party vote for national and also the candidate vote, and that I will be the best advocate and representative to address those issues, as I've said, in bringing together the divisiveness and enabling and empowering our people in the communities, education, employment, and believing in ourselves. We know the solutions, we know the answers, we know our problems, and the National Party is all about devolving that power back to our people, mana and mana motuhakitanga.
Tēnā.
Kia ora.
E ako mare kura tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you all very much again for jumping off the campaign trail to be with us here in Tāmaki Makaurau. We wish you all the best for the election on October the 14th. Tēnā koutou I tūkaha mai I tēnei pō. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Thanks to our candidates in Te Tai Hauauru. And the main thing we need to say is get out and vote. Aha koko waito tangata, aha koko waito wahine. E puta ki te pōti. We wish them all the very best for the campaign. And after the break, we have our panel of experts. Professor Ella Henry and Marnie Dunlop are here with us to decipher and to review this debate. This is Te Pōtitanga 2023. Kia ora mai anō, and here to unpack the performance of our Te Tai Hauauru candidates are our savvy, sartorial, skillful specialist scholars of political science. She is the Professor of International Business Strategy and Entrepreneurship at AUT University, Ahorangi Ala Henry Tēnā.
Kia ora.
Mai hoki mai, and she is the former broadcaster, now communications specialist expert, and she's awesome too. So if you want some service, me wai atu ki aia. And now she's an adept political commentator, Mani Donald. Tēnā koe, hoki mai anō, tēnā korua. Okay. Overall responses, first of all. I mean, these are strong wahine, and they're not afraid to say their bit.
Absolutely. In fact, of the panels, I thought that this was amongst the most feisty. They clearly all had a very strong, passionate position to defend. I mean, it is clear those who've been in Parliament and are used to parliamentary debates have certain skills that they're able to transport. But by and large, I was really engaged. These were three very strong individuals who just happened to be wahine toa, who presented their case, I think, very well.
It's interesting coming off the back of, obviously, last night, Ka Rua Rāwhiti and Hauraki Waikato, Labour, Māori Party. And I think with the national representation in there, it really changes the dynamic and creates that feistiness and is a little bit fiery. I do have to say, though, I was a little bit disappointed at Soraya and Hardie's for not being over as much policy in detail as they probably should have been. Debbie could interject quite a lot in terms of being able to either, say what either correct them on their policy that they was talking about or bringing up their own policy, because another thing that Hardie's said was that she can't necessarily always shape the policy, and that's not necessarily the aspirational kind of goal that Māori would like to see themselves in Parliament.
There is a role for advocacy, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. But I agree with you entirely. The position that was taken really was, I'm at the table, I'm at the caucus, I'm representing Māori, but that isn't necessarily reflected in the National Party policies that have been emerging, particularly over the last 3 months, where, the closing down of the Māori Health Authority, the getting rid of race-based policies actually flies in the face of some of the things that
could the same be said also for the Labour Party? I mean, Soraya, if she gets back in as the MP, yes, she's done a bit of work already in Parliament. She's stood before, actually, in the electorate and didn't win against Tariana Turia. But could you make the same accusation, the same charge?
Absolutely, and in fact, many Māori have been saying the same thing to the Labour caucus, the Māori Labour caucus, for quite some time. We have the largest number of Māori in Parliament that we've ever had in history, and for many of us that has not been enough to stop the downgrading of our life and our well-being, and that's problematic.
And they had the mandate to make that transformational change, and you look at their track record and they haven't, and I've noticed the narrative change with Kushla last night as well, of vote us in so that we can keep momentum going, we can keep building on what we've done. The fact of the matter is that they should have been doing more, and we saw Mika walk out because she felt that she couldn't influence how she should have influenced that space and within that Māori caucus that they did have. This
is an interesting race. It's going to be a tight race, I think. There was probably some surprise. We can talk about the other polls because it's okay, as I said last night. We're all whānau. I think there was some surprise that race was tight, and in actual fact, Soraya Peke-Mason was just ahead. I kind of wasn't surprised. I thought it was always going to be quite a tight race because Labour has performed traditionally really well in this law here.
Absolutely, it's currently being held by them. I mean, I guess what really plays on my mind is the numbers of people who are being polled who are either uncertain or not answering. At the end of the day, that 10, 15, 20, and in this case nearly 30% of people who were surveyed are going to decide on the night. And I may well be one of those people. I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to do when I go into that booth. It's between me and God, and she is wise.
I like that line. I should have used that tonight.
No, you must.
No, I could use it tomorrow at the Māori policy debate. Is it going to be really tight at the end, do you think? Or are the polls too early to be able to say what the definitive thing's going to be?
What we are seeing is that there is a huge majority, a huge amount of people who are undecided, not only in Māori electorates, but in across the country. We're seeing that with early voter turnout. It's lower than it has been in previous elections. So there is a massive get for these candidates to be able to really convince them to how long do we have? 10 days for that last day to be able to, for Māori to make that decision. However, with this particular race, you know, Soraya, we thought of Labour, you know, with Adrian stepping down, but Soraya doesn't have the same powerhouses that Adrian did with, you know, with that campaign team. We're seeing the Māori Party really mobilise, and they know how to run on the ground campaigns, and we've seen that, and they also know how to engage rangatahi, and the rangatahi vote for Māori is key.
Why are so many Māori, this is a general question, not just for Te Tai Hauauru, why are so many Māori voters undecided now, particularly with the way that Māori have been played as a football in this particular campaign? What do you put that down to, Ahorangi?
In my view, perhaps as much as 50% of the Māori population has been battered, really seriously battered by the last 20, perhaps even 30 years of neoliberal policy, which has made home ownership and paying for education so much more distant a dream. And so that's PTSD we're seeing. You know, indecisiveness, a lack of commitment, a lack of courage. That is all about being battered by political will. And there are some of us who are fortunate who've weathered it quite well. And we're confused because we're looking at the major parties and going, what is the actual difference between your policies? Where are your differences in terms of housing and you know, poverty eradication and health improvements?
Is the incremental way in which both National and Labour, actually, I mean, there's been surprise at the way the leaders are very similar. Both bought their first houses at 24 years of age in one debate that they mentioned. Is the aspiration that parties like the Greens and the Māori Party, is that what will appeal, do you think, to voters? Because both main parties, Labour and National, have got a very incremental approach.
I think, Ahorangi, you nailed it just then, of course, around, you know, there's a certain amount, I guess, faction of us who are so engaged, and we are following this. But when we have been, Māori have been political footballs, we've been the collateral damage. And if we do see the government, based on the polls that we're going to see come in, we are going to continue to suffer. But it means that we have a huge amount of Māori who are disengaged and who are not. Because the fact of the matter is that if you're not going to be able to put food on your table, the last thing you're worried about is who you're going to be bloody voting for.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that struck me tonight was, and they all said it many times, working with community organisation, knowing who those community organisations are, whether it's housing, mental health, that kind of thing. It came out a lot in this debate, which says a lot, I think, about the access and the way in which these candidates have worked on the ground with those communities. It was particularly highlighted here tonight.
Which is really laudable. But, I mean, if you're in politics and you're talking about working with communities, where I come from, that's co-governance. And we're not even allowed to use that term to describe working with communities in a te empowering way. That's all that is, nothing more complicated than that. But we've got whole political parties being built on not being allowed to do that. And yet we've got candidates saying we have a long history of doing it. I don't know. Yeah,
but it was an interesting comment from Harete Hipangai about the treaty obligations and te tiriti obligations, and then trying to justify getting rid of te aka whai ora because it's a big bureaucracy which has only been going for a year, when all the other candidates said, well, actually, this is a way of getting te tiriti obligations in action.
I found that really interesting, how she was kind of arguing the same point while having, you know, pumping the money into community organisations. That is what Te Aka Whai Ora is doing, or will do. It is that by having Te Aka Whai Ora, you're not taking that away from these community organisations. There's devolution, there's empowering these communities in order to do that, mahi.
I have enormous respect for those Māori who have put themselves, and I know this because, you know, Whina Cooper supported National, Latimer supported National.
Sir James Henare.
Sir James Henare. These were farming stock for whom, at a time, National represented the farmers. And so I have a lot of respect for Māori that find themselves, you know, being part of that National ambit. But I think it's actually getting harder to use Māori argument and sentiment to justify that position. And unless National comes up with something really innovative to address these huge issues, then it's a big, irredeemable problem.
And Luxon did not prove that with your interview the other night.
And the other thing it showed tonight was the uselessness of the facilitator to be able to ensure that everyone got their time to be able to talk. And it everyone's got their work on.
I'm going to bring you a whistle.
A little bow.
A little bow.
Tēnā koe, tēnā korua. E te ahorangi, tēnā koe, e te whanaunga, tēnā korua I a korua mai. Ngā mihi nui ki a korua. Thanks to our panel here tonight. And we have more. Tomorrow night is our final debate in this election campaign, and some of us are doing cartwheels about that now, and there's still 10 days to go to the election. It is our Māori policy debate tomorrow, featuring Marama Davidson of the Green Party, Willie Jackson of the Labour Party, Taukuta Ferris of the Māori Party, Tama Pōtaka of the National Party, Shane Jones of New Zealand First, and Karen Chua of the ACT Party. That's at 8:45 p.m, a little later, 8:45 p.m, Pōpō live. Looking forward to that one. That is us tonight. Again, our thanks to our candidates and also to our superlative panel here tonight. We will see you again live at 8:45 tomorrow. Pōpō. Until then, kia mau ki te turanga o taputapu Aotea. Haumie, huie, taiki e. Nā te puna whakatongarewa, te hui i tautoko.